everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Bodcast. On the pod today, we have another return guest, but as a 4-time world powerlifting champion, it is safe to say he is a guest who can return as many times as he likes. Welcome back to the podcast, Julian McKerrow.
Wow, that's the best intro I've ever had. Thanks.
Yeah, did you like that? I'm so excited to have you back. I loved a podcast we did, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. We did a really great podcast on you, on powerlifting. And some of that I want to retouch on again today, because I just think it's really great kind of content. And then there's obviously there's been twists and turns in your journey. So there's going to be a bit of a new narrative as well. But let's just start with a little refresher course. Can you please introduce yourself to my audience and just brief them on who you are and what you do and why you're all things Bodcast?
I'm Julian. I do powerlifting. I do it sort of as a hobby, I would say. So I don't get paid for powerlifting. But yeah, I am a 4-time world champion. I'm like a 5 or 6-time British champion. I've set quite a few world records during that time. Oh, and I'm also a vegetarian as well. So that makes a big difference.
Yeah, we're going to get onto that because obviously we're going to talk about all things training and nutrition, but it's so funny. People need to understand Julian is like a beast, as you would expect, but he's like a beast of a man. And you just would never think looking at him that he's not a meat eater. So it's quite interesting. And we definitely will get onto that. I love it that you're like, yeah, it's just a bit of a hobby. I've broken a few world records. No biggie. No props. It's like, what? This is amazing. Okay, so talk to me about powerlifting. How would you define it as a standalone sport? As in, what does it actually mean? And what are the disciplines required?
Cool. So powerlifting, I would say, is an all-out like strength power sport, as opposed to Olympic lifting, which is like a blend of power, very technical. So the core disciplines or the core lifts in powerlifting would be squat, so a back squat. The next lift would be a bench press. And the final lift would just be a deadlift. The way that it generally goes is you'll have a full power meet. So you'll usually do all 3 disciplines and you get 3 attempts at each. So you'll get 3 attempts at squat, 3 attempts at bench press, 3 attempts at deadlift. Your best attempt of the 3, if they pass the standard and they're given the green flag basically by the referees, best attempt of each lift is added together to give you your total, and your total is usually what determines what place you are in the competition. Oh, and you'll also be in different categories. So you have weight categories, age categories.
So I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite lift? What are you the best at? What do you struggle with the most at? And is there a reason? Is there a reason why?
My best lift is my favorite lift as well as my deadlift.
Yeah,
for sure. I feel like it's quite a bro movement. Like most people can pick things up off the ground, but the more you do it, the more you'll refine it and the better you'll get at it. My least favorite lift is squat, but not because I'm adverse to like leg day. It's just because
evidently having seen your legs, which look like massive prop hams in the middle of a turkey dinner. Anyway, carry on.
No, it's just because. So when I first started weight training, I bought a kit from Argos, like those plastic dumbbell kits, and I just trained in my bedroom. I didn't have a rack or a bench, so I couldn't really squat. All I could do is floor press, which was awkward, like rolling it on top of me and then pressing it.
Yeah.
And deadlift.
Yeah.
So I just didn't squat for years. And then when I went to squat in the gym, I just sort of found it quite awkward. Like my mobility wasn't there. I didn't really have anyone guiding me. So I just found it uncomfortable. So I did machines, which is fine. Like there's nothing wrong with machines. So I did leg press and leg extension, which was fine. But then when I decided I wanted to do powerlifting, because I had neglected that specific movement for so long, it was lacking.
Yeah. I get that. I much preferred deadlift to squats, and there's something else I want to ask you about on this topic in a minute. But I also just find with squats, like there's something about it. It's just so hard that sometimes I even get a bit anxious before like a big leg day session thinking about squats, whereas deadlifts I think are far more technical, therefore far more difficult from like a central nervous system technique point of view. But they're so much more fun once you can do it. Like, I find them almost easier on my body in a way than a squat. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. So for me personally, I feel like the in the back of my head, the person who's afraid of getting injured or anything like that is definitely loudest when it's a squat.
Yeah.
Because you can mess up on so many aspects of a squat. Like I've messed up my shoulder on a squat. I've seen people mess up their wrist, and I'm talking about when you go really, really extreme and really heavy.
Yeah.
So it's weird because when you do it, I'm usually quite nervous before the squat. Like as you said, the day of the squat. When I've done it, I'm usually quite pleased. Deadlift, I'm always looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And I'll just be happy regardless. But yeah, squat, I don't know. You have to be built different to really, really love it. And there are some people like that.
Yeah, the fucking weirdos who like climb Mount Everest. But I'm like, you could not pay me enough money to have to hire a yak to put my bag on because just climbing is so hard. Like, absolutely not. I wanted to ask you, actually, I don't even think we did this last time I had you on, and I'm already like 3 questions in, and I don't think I've ever asked you this. What are your numbers? What do you squat? What's your best squat, bench, and dead, bro?
So my best in the gym, my best squat in the gym is 300 kilo. My best bench press in the gym is 210. My best deadlift in the gym is 340. And then at competition, my best squat is 287. Bench press 195. Deadlift 332.
That's really interesting. So you find that you really hit your best in training, and then on competition day, you should probably expect it to drop down a tiny bit.
For the majority of people, yeah. And there's a number of reasons why. The biggest one is because competition, you can't control many factors. Like you have a set amount of rest. So for example, if you're in a small regional competition and there's 2 of you in your class, you might not have as long a rest as if you're in an international comp and there's like 10 people all taking a turn.
Yeah.
So just imagine you do your massive squat and you're like, okay, I need 10 minutes rest. Yeah. But they're like, no, you have 3 minutes.
I'm amazed at that. I would have thought it would be more internationally controlled, as in this is how much rest you get, and this is I just would have thought that's how they do it.
To an extent, but if you have a big flight, 100% you're going to get the longest rest. If you have a big competition, but if it's a short one, they do try to add in, I think, at least 3 minutes. But
that's not enough for a powerlifter. Yeah. That's not
exerting.
I would have said like bare minimum 5 minutes for a powerlifter, like minimum.
It honestly depends on the competition, and yeah. Also, other things can happen. So, as I mentioned, you only get 3 attempts at the lift. So let's say I've got knee wraps. Maybe I was in a rush. Actually, it happened before. I've been in a rush. I didn't do my 1 rep properly, but I still was limited on time. So I went on to try to do it. I messed up, but I knew 100% I could do it. Yeah. But that's your 3rd attempt. There's no more attempts. So it's done. Whereas in the gym, you can recoup, get your head together, give it another try. So that's generally why you can normally lift more in the gym than in a competition.
Yeah, because you set your own kind of comfort zone, I guess. That's really interesting. Okay. All right. So how many competitions a year do you or like most powerlifters aim to compete in? Is it like bodybuilding where it's like they'll have like a season where they'll do like 2 or 3 kind of competitions and then they have an off season for a year, or like how do you kind of structure it?
I would say on average, I would expect most beginners to do about 3 to 5 per year.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, just because you can do like regional ones and up and coming ones. So people usually use it just to get used to it.
Yeah.
When you start to do more like international competitions, I would expect 3 maximum, really.
And how close together are they?
So for me, you would usually do the British and World Championships. So British is normally in the summer. World Championships is normally around November time. But it depends, because in theory, you can do as many competitions as you like. So I have seen some people just rack them up, and they'll just do regional. It can be good for experience, but I think it's just boosting their ego, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is what I was going to ask you again. So, because obviously I work mainly in physique and that's aesthetic, and obviously I lift and I like to lift heavy, and that's how I got into what I do now, was lifting. But I don't know a lot. Well, I know more than most that don't do powerlifting, but I don't know a lot about it. So what would be optimal in terms of the body, in terms of your performance? Like, what's an optimal kind of acceptable amount of competitions to do per year? And it doesn't matter how far apart they're spaced.
I would imagine 2 is probably optimal,
Right?
because you can get platform rust. So obviously you're lifting to different standards. You're lifting to like judges' commands.
Yeah.
And then you can get nervous in front of a big crowd. You can get nervous in front of judges. So if you're not used to it, then that can play a factor. Also, you have to peak. So with any strength training, you'll go through like cycles. Unfortunately, you can't get infinitely stronger.
Yeah, I know.
So you can't just chuck on 1% every month. It doesn't really work. So generally, like, you'll start here, you'll slowly go up, and then you'll drop down because you need to rest. So after a couple of weeks, then you'll go up and rest. So some people can plan it. So maybe the start of the year, they'll do a comp. Maybe middle of the year, they'll do another comp, because that will allow your body time to rest, recover. You might need a mental break, and also to just get stronger.
Yeah, well, yeah. And I suppose that, well, we're going to get onto this, but the longer you've been lifting, the longer you need in training to try and increase that strength. I mean, okay, right. So before we get onto that, because we are going to touch on that, and I'm really interested to hear your answer, talk to me about the structure and the programming of your training in the lead up to a competition. You know, what does the weekly training split look like? Is there accessory work in there? I know that you're a fan of accessory work. And if so, why? How do you program deloads into it? And how do you taper your training in the lead up to the competition? So I want like the bird's eye view, big picture. Mm-hmm. This is what the whole kind of macro cycle looks like.
Okay, so I'll pretend like you're going to compete, and I'm just giving you a breakdown of what you need to expect.
Yes, I love that. Okay, I'm in. Go.
So basically, I would normally I do it in like 2 waves. I've occasionally done an 11-week block. So I'll start off quite light, maybe 60%. And I'll build up my weight over the time with the plan to peak or potentially compete at the end of the 11 weeks. The issue which most people find is if you're not super young and super new to it, doing 11 weeks intense training is super hard. Like, you won't recover.
Yeah.
Like, you'll either get sick, injured, or you'll just fatigue, and you won't make any progress.
Yeah.
So unless you're very elite and you just monitor your rest, or you're very young people can just get away with it. You won't recover. So generally I find 6-week blocks to be very good. So I'll do like a 6-week block. So let's say you can squat 100 kilos for one. I would say at the end of the 6 weeks, it would be nice to do either 100 kilos for 2, or maybe like 110 for 1. Okay. So you've done that 6 weeks, you've progressed up to that, you've hit the 110. Mm-hmm. Then you'll have a deload. So for me, that's usually, I would reduce the weight to about 60% of what I had been doing the previous week. So it's going to be drastically lighter.
Yeah.
And I would be doing minimal reps, like 3 reps. It's just to keep moving so you don't forget the movement pattern, so you don't get stiff. And I'll do like 1 or 2 sets. Literally just go in there, do a little bit of weight, do a lot of stretching, and then aim to be out of there. And you want to really have a mental rest as well, so you're not stressing, you're just relaxing, and you're because the issue with some people who take 100% deload and just don't go to the gym, sometimes they'll be worried that, how will it feel when I go back to the gym next week?
Yeah.
So doing a little bit of weight will normally get rid of that worry. And then the aim is to start off the next 6-week block just a little bit heavier. So if you started off week 1 at 60 kilos, I would say maybe try to start off at 62 or 65. You chip away. The more junior or beginner you are, the stronger or the quicker you're going to make progress. So if you started off at 60 kilos, the next 6 weeks, you'll probably start off at like 80 kilos or something.
Yeah. Those newbie gains are real. That honeymoon phase of lifting, so lovely. Yeah, go on.
And then with regards to a competition, for me, I usually am a few kilos heavier than my actual weight class.
Oh, right.
So it becomes quite technical.
Yeah.
So maybe when I'm 4 weeks out, if I'm 3 kilos too heavy, which is a very small percent for my body weight because I'm like 130-ish kilos.
Normal.
Because if I was to say to someone super light, you have to drop 3 kilos, they'll be like, how?
Yeah, whereas, no, fair.
Yeah, if I'm like super heavy, it's not that bad.
Yeah, it's not as much of a stretch.
But I would usually try to really plan my nutrition. So I'll try to have most of my carbs, because that's like for me the fuel around my training. I'll have most of them before my meal. So often people are like, oh, you're going to cut out your carbs. I'm like, no, I'm just going to move it.
Yeah, not for a power lifter. It's just about, You commented on a post I did about this, actually. I was so complimented. You're like, oh, this is a great answer. But yeah, meal timing, like people just, I think there's so much emphasis now on like calories, and it's not about this, it's not about that. It's not, but that people actually have kind of like poo-pooed meal timing. And if you have a performance goal, it's fucking important to be smart about.
It's not even a theoretical thing, because I personally have noticed a big difference. Like I might have been going away on a holiday, so I've tried to eat loads and loads of food like the night before because I wanted to train really early. But for me, I found that the way my body digests the food, and it just doesn't work well, as opposed to if I've had like steady meals throughout the day and then a big meal before I train, allow it to digest. Everyone is a bit different, but if I'm overweight for a comp, I'll generally try to have most of my carbs before I lift. And the reason is because my body needs to use that. So hopefully it would use most of that for fuel. And if me moving around my meals isn't helping me to like reduce weight in any way, I'll usually add in either HIIT. So I'll be on the bike for 10 minutes doing like some intense training, or I would do a water cycle, which is again a bit more technical. But the thing with a water load is very specific for like performance training and like boxers and people with weight cuts. So it's not generally for most people.
One of my best friends is I should actually get him on. I don't know why I've never had him on. He's like a jiu-jitsu champion, world champion.
Wow.
And I remember, I don't know why, we were at a wedding. He was doing a water cut in Ibiza a few years ago before competition for a wedding. And he was just like, he was like a zombie. It was awful watching him, but he killed it. He won. But I mean, it was absolutely awful watching it happen, especially because we were all pissed in Ibiza and he was there like half asleep on the lunch table. I was like, oh dear. Anyway, carry on.
Oh yeah, it's grim. But I feel like when you like start to get more in tune with your body, you realize the importance of nutrition, the importance of rest.
Yeah.
So the closer, it's bad, but the closer I get to a comp, the more I focus on rest. But really, if I want to be optimal, I should focus on like just sleeping, water intake. And then because I've been lifting heavy for like a solid 6 weeks, I'll usually have a few more sessions of like soft tissue massage or anything like that.
How do you, when you have done water cuts in the past, do you have any things in place to make sure that it doesn't get dangerous at all? Because I know that sometimes people can find that they get really bad cramping or that they start passing out. Like, is there a way, if anyone's lifting that does, and by the way, guys, just for everybody listening out there, this is something literally for a specific, as Julian said, specific type of performance athlete. This is not something anyone else should be fucking around with because it can be really dangerous. But is there a way that you do it to make sure that your body is as safe as possible? Is there, like, I don't know, any supplements you take or any hacks?
There's nothing I'd specifically take. I mean, I do. Well, that's a lie. So when I'm walking around, I do carry sweets and salt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good. Yeah.
And water. So just in case I get lightheaded, I'm like, oh no, I need sugar, have sweets. Or if it, as you said, cramping or anything like that, then I would just have some salt and water to help with the rehydration. Sounds weird, but
No,
it's what the body needs.
It's what the body needs, all in equal measure. So people think of hydration, they always just think of water. They don't understand that it's a balance of salt, sugar, water. And I had Dame Kelly Holmes on actually, and she used to be like, she was kind of like laughing at energy drinks. She was like, orange juice, half a teaspoon of salt, water, done. Like that's your energy drink. That's all you need. And I just found that really refreshing and quite funny. I like how you were saying about, you know, again, another podcast guest we had on was Zach George, the CrossFit guy. And he's like a really great CrossFitter. I just completely demoted him to a gender. But he was saying that, you know, he trains like 6 days a week, doing like 3 different sessions a day of every discipline, obviously, because it's CrossFit. And I was like, whoa, that's a lot. He was like, no, I'm adapted. Like it took me years to get to that level. I find that really interesting. And I guess with that adaptation, when you realize that your body can handle that amount of training, that's also probably when you start to see that plateau happen, right?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah. Yeah, it's very annoying. So I feel like you spend all this time battering your body, and then your body's like, whoa, I need to do something to stop getting battered. I'm going to get stronger. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, I'm in a good place. I don't need to get stronger anymore. And you're like, so I have to figure out how to batter it even more.
Yeah, well, this is what I was going to ask you. So this is the next question. I said, I've written here, how do you as a very mature lifter, and by that I mean, you know, advanced and adapted, break through training plateaus? Like what are the typical for you and just for powerlifters, like blood flow restriction? Like how do you try and break through it?
For me, I like to learn. So like I'll check out stuff you post, I'll watch videos, just anyone. I'll ask people questions, people stronger than me. I'll just bug them and be like, oh, what have you noticed works best? So for me, for example, like for me personally, I like to think I'm quite a good deadlifter. That's my stronger of the 3 lifts. And what I used to do is one of my favorite deadlifters, I just would ask him like, what have you found work best for you? And then I would just implement those exercises. Not everything worked for me, that he did, but generally it's just asking other people what they do. I haven't found any specific supplements or anything like that work. It's just consistency and being realistic. Yeah. Because obviously, as you said, the longer you train, the less gains you generally make. Mm-hmm. So you have to be realistic and be like, I'm not going to make 20 kilo PR every session. Yeah. Maybe I can PR in technique. Maybe I can PR in recovery. Maybe I can PR in the quality of the rep. So I really focus on that because you want the weakest link in the chain to be strong. Mm-hmm. And then generally the whole machine will be really strong.
That really brings me back around to the accessory work. So how do you factor that into your kind of training, which is obviously largely performance focused? How do you kind of navigate your training split to include accessory work, you know, so I don't know, shoulder work to help your bench, like that kind of thing?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've found the best accessories through recovery.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was naive.
You're like, no.
But I 100% do a lot of accessories because it's all well and good doing, like for me, squat, bench and deadlift. But because the body is so complex, you can strengthen it in many other ways. And for example, one of the top accessories I find for bench press, other than bench pressing, is ironically upper back work.
Oh, really?
Because if you have a really big, strong back, it's a platform. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Sorry. People who can't see, I'm like a rocket. My hands are like a rocket powered by my back. I'm trying to imagine what he's saying. Yeah, go on.
So so the upper back work is just an opposite of the bench press. So I'll do a bench press, but then I'll go away and I'll do like a chest supported seal row or bent over row, because then I know that will help build the foundation for my back, which in turn should help me be able to press more, have something stronger to press off. Because it's sort of like in this example, if you imagine that you have a really like unsturdy wooden bench, which is just rocking and everything, you're going to probably struggle to press very heavy. If it's super solid and sturdy, you're probably going to be able to press a bit more. So I definitely focus on accessories. I make time for accessories. And I will usually do heavyweight, but many sets, but lower reps for my main lifts. accessories, I'll generally do hypertrophy. So almost like a bodybuilder-esque. So lower sets, but higher reps, because I want to build the tissue. I want to build the muscle, because in turn, I believe that having that mass will help me move mass, like mass move mass, basically.
100%. It's really interesting. I get so many of my clients, like, I don't understand, like, hypertrophy is strength and strength is hypertrophy. Like, why does it require different training? I'm like, it's like a Venn diagram. In the middle, there's a crossover and you get strength and hypertrophy, but they're different. They're different protocols of training to get a different result. But yeah, Julian's one of those athletes, and I think we talked about this in our last podcast, who he doesn't, I think you think powerlifter a lot of the time, you don't really think of someone who's like in physiquey shape, but Julian's definitely in that middle Venn diagram where he's just like, I reckon you could compete at a bodybuilding level, to be honest, but not that you'd find that remotely fun. Okay, before we move on to nutrition and what's been going on with you lately, which I feel bad saying this, but I'm excited to hear about this story because I'm so confused. I only know little bits of it and I need to know the whole thing. You kind of touched on it before, and you kind of said that you like to drop weight. So this is something I've always wondered about as someone who's never competed at a powerlifting meet. How does a powerlifter go about choosing the right kind of weight class or competition for them? Because I know that you could do it either way, right? You could drop weight, potentially, maybe, and I'm interested to hear you talk about this, lose strength when you do that, but be more competitive in a lighter weight class. Or you can aim to gain weight, potentially increase strength, but maybe be less competitive in a heavier weight class. Do I have that right? And can you please?
That's 100%. Yeah, okay. That's 100% it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So talk me through your thoughts on this, and also about potentially losing strength when you are cutting.
So the first aspect of the question, so like, how do you determine the class? I usually say, unless you're going to break some form of record, like a British record, any record, I don't recommend cutting, because you are going to lose strength. There's no way about it. Like, you're just going to lose strength. If you're naturally 100 kilos and then you decide you want to cut down to like 90 kilos or maybe 95 kilos because you can break a record, then that makes sense. But if you're cutting just because you want to be on the top of that weight class, you're going to lose a couple of kilos on some of your lifts. So for me, I usually sit around 3 kilos heavier, just because basically I compete at 125. So I usually sit around 128 to 130, depending on how much I've eaten, because I'm competitive at that class. And to be honest, because I prefer the way I look, like leaner.
Yeah.
Like, I just prefer to be that. Whereas if I was in the next class, I would be up to 140 kilos. And realistically, you want to grow into your class. You don't really want to be small in your class, unless you're beginning. If you're beginning and you're starting out, then there's no pressure. But if you're aiming to be like a top 3, you're trying to win your class, you're trying to set records, you want to be as competitive as possible. Yeah, it's a bit of a balance.
No, but it's really interesting. I mean, I think if like you said, like moving mass, if shifting heavy fucking load was my goal, you wouldn't catch me cutting into competition, like you say, unless the stakes are really high and someone's dangling a trophy, silverware or a world record in your face. It makes total sense. Lastly, talk to me about your nutrition, because you are a veggie. So A, why? And B, how do you make sure that you get in adequate protein for recovery and kind of muscle protein synthesis throughout the course of the day as a veggie?
Cool. Yeah, so I've been veggie my whole life. My parents just brought me up vegetarian. So my mum is vegetarian and my dad eats meat.
Right.
So from what I understand, because I've actually asked my mum a few times, I was like, why are you vegetarian? So she's Caribbean, and when she was in Jamaica, I think they used to eat quite a few like just weird stuff when she was younger, and it just put her off. So she said when she had her own kid, they wouldn't be eating meat because she didn't have a good experience eating meat when she was younger.
Yeah.
So me being the firstborn, she was like, yeah, you're vegetarian.
You don't get a choice. But you stuck with it, like, because you could have at any point been like, no, I don't really want to do that. But you're fine with it, which is amazing, again, considering what you do. And by the way, a lot of people listening will be like, there are like incredible athletes and bodybuilders at elite levels who are vegan. So obviously it's doable, but I would say it is suboptimal. So it's still really interesting to ask about.
Yeah, no, I have stuck to it. So the more like I read into it, because I was just intrigued as to the benefits of like eating meat and not. For me personally, it was just I just started to get a soft spot for animals. When I was younger, I was always like, no, I don't really care, because my dad would eat meat, and I remember a few times we would have like Christmas turkeys, and he would have them at home and like fatten them up, and they would
Oh my God! Well, no wonder. No,
and then he would just kill them.
Savage. No wonder you're like, no, I'm okay. I think most kids would be like, oh my God, don't kill the turkey. Although turkeys are pretty ugly, to be fair, but still.
But yeah, that would happen, and then I never really thought anything of it. But then I don't know, I just started to get a bit more of a soft spot, and I was like, oh, I've never really had any issues up until now. Maybe I'll keep on it. But then the more I was reading into, oh, am I deficient in anything? Am I missing out on anything? The more I would put emphasis on trying to have a more balanced as I can, vegetarian diet.
Yeah.
So I try to have less processed food and try to have a lot of natural food, but 100%, like from a performance and just general living aspect, the most optimal way would be a balance between like meat and having vegetarian. I don't really understand people who argue to say, no, you should only be vegetarian, or no, you should only eat meat. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. I mean, but this, the best diet is a balanced diet. And in all contexts, like you say, macronutrients. But actually, as a vegetarian, it's really bloody easy. Really easy to get. Yeah, but you can get all the protein you want. A vegan is a whole other thing. And there's so many people who are like, no, I eat loads of beans. And it's like, okay, but that's not a complete protein. So no, if you're a vegan, it's really, really hard. Like you've got soya, mycoprotein. There's like a really small select few things you can do to get your complete protein in without having to combine plant-based foods, which then sees your fats and your carbs and essentially your calories kind of climb. But a vegetarian, like you get your eggs, you get whey,
eggs, dairy,
you get your Greek yogurt, like you're sweet.
Yeah, pretty much. Like my diet's pretty boring, so it'll be like eggs, oats, rice, lentils, beans, and I do have plant-based stuff as well. I do have protein shakes as well. So people often wonder if I have that, but I do have protein shakes as well. And I've thankfully never had any health issues, or like I never get sick, for example. Like I don't have any deficiencies, or to be honest though, I do believe a big factor is my genetics, I would say. I've always naturally been big. This is something which I think people should also remember, that I've always naturally been big.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, even before I started training, I was like 115 kilos.
Wow.
So,
well, this is the thing though. This is the thing. You don't become an elite level athlete or a world champion of fucking anything unless you have the right genetics and the right work ethic. And if you have those two, you can't have one, you have to have both. And if you have both, you're sweet. But yeah, it is. I mean, look at James. James is like, I don't know any other white men that look like James. James is like 6'5". He's 120 kg. Absolutely. Like even when he hasn't been to the gym or dieted or thought about anything for like months, 2 months, 3 months, he still looks like a fucking genetic freak of nature. Yeah, like it's insane. Like everybody thinks he's on steroids and he's not, but everyone thinks he is because he's just a complete anomaly. And the thing is that he wasn't the best rugby player on the team ever. Like he had to work his fucking arse off. Yeah, well, it's true. He wasn't like, a Danny Cipriani, like gifted. So you just watch them and you're like, oh my God, you are meant to do this. But he was the one who was like staying late after every training session. Like his recovery days, he was in 2 or 3 physio appointments on that day. Like he worked his butt off to get to international level, but he had the genetics to get him there. And I love that you touch on that because I think in my community now, there's such a big push of like, it's not genetics, it's hard work. It's like, it's both. You don't win Miss Olympia without that, Yeah,
100%. Because just briefly, like even the topic of steroids and like Olympia, I'm also natural.
Yeah.
I was surprised at how many people just in the gym are on some form of PD and they they look good, but they don't look amazing. And that shows because like if you had the top tier like Olympia genetics and then you probably took similar stuff to what these guys take all the time, then you'll be like, whoa.
And then you're Ronnie Coleman.
Yeah, you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everyone would be on the stage, wouldn't they? Because it's not like these guys in the gym aren't training hard and they're not taking whatever they feel like they need to take.
No, it's such a good point. It's such a good point and a really interesting, I guess, lens to look at it through. Okay, let's move on to present day. Talk to me about, and I really don't even know the answer to this. What happened in your sleep? What happened?
No one knows. So basically, I can laugh now because thankfully I'm like pretty much okay. But like I somehow caused genuine nerve damage. So I woke up at like 3 a.m. in the night and I was just like stuck. I've had it where like my neck's stiff before and you sort of wake up and you're like, oh, it's stiff, and then it gets a bit better. It was locked. Like I was the Tin Man. I couldn't move around and I couldn't go back to sleep. It was like that painful and I couldn't take anything because it's nerve damage. You can't take paracetamol or ibuprofen because it doesn't reduce nerve pain.
Yeah.
So I just woke up and I was like, oh, great. And so I spent like the rest of the night just trying to stretch and foam roll, but I was just stuck. So I went to the gym because we have a physio in our gym the next morning. And like they did 2 hours of like massage sessions to loosen up. They loosened off the neck, but then the whole of like my right side, like my arm and stuff just wasn't working. So like I couldn't grip, I couldn't hold things, and it was super weak. So every now and then, so for example, if I tried to like flex my bicep, it would just like pulse because it just couldn't hold the
tension.
Couldn't hold the tension. And I was like, this is weird. And I just went to try and do any rehab work, so like negatives or anything like that, and I just couldn't. So I had to do, I can't remember what pain. You know what? I think no pain medicine actually worked. So I was coming into work because if I was at home, I was just thinking about it too much. So I was coming into work and like I had a box and I was sort of like this because this was the only position which didn't hurt.
Oh my God.
So I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. And then after 5 days, the pain started to stop, but then the muscle it wasn't working. So I had to get rehab work. I was doing it like 3 times a week. Just getting soft tissue massages and rehab work to try and figure out what was going on because no one really knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And still, when I was trying to like brush my teeth, my arm would just drop. So I'd just be like this and just drop.
That's mad.
They said, I know, I used to sleep really badly. I'd like sleep like this, like on my front, and
yeah,
I'm apparently a really aggressive sleeper. Like at one point in my old house, I woke up and like my head was bleeding because at some point I head butted the bed frame.
What?
Yeah,
so my daughter. This is what my 1-year-old does. She's like walk in, she's covered in sick, she's got a massive egg-shaped bruise on her head. I'm like, what has happened in the night? Right, carry on.
I don't know why I'm so aggressive in my sleep. I don't know, maybe it's like a Jekyll and Hyde and
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. But, mean Julian.
But yeah, so they said basically I slept funny and I compressed a nerve for multiple hours in my sleep. So imagine like you're like this, but the nerve is like pinched.
Yeah.
It was one of the nerves in my neck. It was pinched for hours. Because it was pinched for hours, it genuinely caused nerve damage. Like they couldn't send the signal.
Is this partly because of how big you are as well? Or could this happen to anyone?
Well, to an extent, because I guess we're all proportional. But if you sleep really badly, the bigger you are, the more likely it's going to happen.
So what was the protocol to rehab you?
I went to like 4 different physio. I was getting so annoyed.
Yeah.
Because I was like, tell me what I need to do to fix this and I will do it.
Yeah.
And we were just doing constant physio and they were like, you basically had to rebuild that movement pattern in the attempt to make the nerve fire off to reconnect because obviously the brain is sending the signal.
Yeah.
So I was doing like curls, but negative. So I'd literally hold my hand up and then slowly let it come down because that's all I could do. And then I progressed to like a band coming up.
Yeah.
And I progressed to like 3 kilo dumbbell. And I had to do that from February up until realistically about May or June. That's how long it was imbalanced.
Like 4 months of just of trying to get that. Could you feel it coming back? Or could you feel the...
I could feel it coming back. Yeah. So actually that's a good point. So it was also like numb and tingly, and every now and then it would just tingle. And it did actually hurt for quite some time. I genuinely think I just got used to the pain.
Yeah.
Because after a while you just ignore it. And then, it did slowly start to come back. But all I could do is just kept hammering the rehab work, and it was so boring.
I know.
I was like to my physio, and I was like, oh, can I still train heavy with my left arm, for example? I don't want that to atrophy. Yeah. Because after like a couple of, 3 to 5 weeks of non-training, usually it starts to...
It depends how sedentary you are. I think it's three weeks, is when, if you are very sedentary, you do start to atrophy. That's what the data shows. But I think it could be longer if you had some kind of movement, if you had some kind of like muscle tension happening. It maybe wouldn't happen that quickly. But yeah, I mean, I think in your case, 3 weeks.
I was like, oh, I mean, fair enough. My right side's out, but it would be nice if I could at least keep my left side.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, you shouldn't really like overdo one side because you could cause an imbalance. You could overstrain it.
Okay.
So that was annoying. So basically what I was doing, I was trying to train as much as I could, and I had like a pain scale. If it was over 5, then I wouldn't want to do it, because what a lot of my physio friends have told me, if you get injured, and you just don't do the movement, then sometimes the muscles and the surrounding tissue can like scab over and scar over. And then it becomes quite difficult to then start doing that movement again. You sort of add on extra time. So they're always like, don't completely discard that movement, just make sure you're not making it any worse. So yeah, I just kept smashing the the rehab. And then I think it was around May time, I was able to like properly back squat, because obviously I have to squat, bench, deadlift. Yeah. I could do a safety bar, which is where you have the handles in front.
Yeah.
And although the weight was directly on my trap and like that area, it wasn't over a 5 out of 10. Yeah. The issue was that I couldn't hold the bar because it was so weak.
This is mad to me.
So I was just like doing a safety bar and like gripping it with one hand and like sort of just resting it with the other hand. So I was still able to squat. Bench press, I couldn't for a long time. I've got videos of me just doing one hand bench press with a dumbbell for ages. So I was doing that. Deadlift, I was using a trap bar and straps. Yeah. Because that was, and very light, because that was the only thing I could do, is just to keep that movement pattern. And then I was like, oh, I forgot I was supposed to be competing in British Championships in like the summer, because I was supposed to defend my title. And then if you win that, you qualify to represent GB at Worlds. Oh. And everyone was like, yeah, there's no way I was going to compete. But I said, I just wanted to see where I was at. So I decided to set that as a goal. And yeah, I just worked on the rehab, managed to get ready, and I actually competed at the British Championships, which was cool.
You did well, no? You placed pretty well.
Yeah, I came third, actually, yeah.
Mate, I love it how you're like, I just, I really like couldn't do it, couldn't function, just rehab. And then casually enter the World Championships and come third. Like, it's insane. Like, but well done you. Like, because this is like, and I mean, I can only ever so slightly imagine after the postnatal period and having to do the amount of rehab work that I had to do. And there are some really dark moments where you're like, am I ever going to get my body back? And for you, I can imagine that would be really big, really scary because of who you are and what you do. And but the fact that you absolutely like immediately like went in to see a physio, immediately started rehabbing, went to go see as many different people as you could to get as many opinions as you could. This is also why you're so successful, because you're proactive and you want to deal with it and you want to get good information. So how is it now? Where are you with the recovery of it?
Luckily, I would say I'm like 95% better, because I can put a number on it. So there's certain movements which I personally haven't done pull-up for a while, because I was scared of putting too much pressure on my left side and like tear my bicep. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of weight just in case. Yeah. But like curls, I can measure it. So it's going to sound ridiculous. But originally, I could hammer curl relatively comfortably, like 40 kilos. So each arm. when I did that, obviously I couldn't do like 3 kilos. But now I'm up to, my bad arm is up to 28 kilos.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's amazing.
So it's there. But things like squat, bench, deadlift, it's all there. 100% back there.
Well, that's, I mean, credit to you. And like, I think a good lesson on resilience. Like some people would have that happen to them and they'd crumble and they'd be like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Whether it's like I said, a lack of being proactive about it and trying to solve the problem, or just feeling so freaked out, because that's really scary to wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to move. And again, like, especially in the context of what you do and who you are, like, it's really overwhelming, but I just think it's a really inspirational kind of tale of like, look, you know, there are people who can help you, even if you don't know what to do. You know, go looking for the answers, put in the work. And 4 months later, you were getting third at the championships, which I know for you isn't the kind of placing you're used to, but that's fucking amazing.
I was actually happy. You know what? It was everyone else. Everyone else has like even higher standards.
Yeah.
They were like, how did you do? I was like, yeah, I came third. I was really happy because I had nerve damage. And they're like, oh, haven't you won it like many times in a row? I was like, yeah.
yeah. I felt like, but no, it is incredible. And it is something, I don't know, it makes me feel good inside. It makes me feel strong. Thanks. It makes me like you even more than I already did, which is a lot, as you well know.
Thanks.
Well, I absolutely loved our chat. What is next for you? And please let my audience know where they can find you.
Oh yeah, of course. So you can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's 365 Muscle UK. And next, it also adds on to the previous story. So I have a qualifier in December. And the reason I have to qualify is because I didn't win the British Championships. Yeah. So I wanted to compete in the European Championships in Helsinki next June.
Yeah.
And only the winner of British or World Championships get an invite for GB. So I'm going to do a qualifier. To be honest, the qualifier should be quite straightforward. It's more like you do the number that you have to hit.
Yeah.
So I should do that in December quite comfortably.
I love it.
But
no biggie.
Yeah.
It's just me.
December.
I'm really, really excited for you. And I have absolutely no doubt in my head that you're going to put in the work and you're going to smash it and you're going to do absolutely brilliantly. And I'm really happy for you that you've managed to get back to where you were, because it is scary what happened, and you're a fucking badass. Of course. So guys, thank you so much for joining me for today's episode of the Bodcast. You might have noticed in the last couple of weeks, we are now doing it bi-weekly. So there will be a new episode every other week, and join me in 2 weeks' time for another brilliant guest. Thanks, guys.